Now, we're ready to get started. For those of you new to ITSM Academy, here's a quick overview. ITSM Academy is a full-service provider of IT service management education. We develop all content in-house. That includes all ITIL education, as well as process design, Agile, and DevOps. And since 2003, we've trained and certified tens of thousands of students. Now let's introduce today's speaker, Mustafa Kapadia. Mustafa is a service line leader for IBM's digital transformation practice, a business advisory practice focused on helping large enterprises transform their software and application delivery. He is an expert in DevOps, cloud, mobile, analytics, application development, outsourcing, and offshoring. Prior to joining IBM, Mustafa was a management consultant with Deloitte's strategy and operations practice. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area and is an avid blogger when time permits, he says, and a speaker and an advisor to startup companies. Good morning, Mustafa, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Karen, Lisa, for having me in the webinar. And guys, friends, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we'll have a great session on DevOps and what it means to be a DevOps leader. I have about 4 or 5 topics I'd like to share with you today, but I also want to leave a healthy amount of portion at the end to talk about question and answers. That's usually when things get a bit more interesting. Please put your comments or add your question in the comment section, and we can kind of go through it at the end.
Mustafa,
so our agenda for today, yes.
Excuse me, before we start, I have a poll that I'd like to just ask your listeners if I could.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, just one quick poll for them. And here's your poll. So your organization is not interested in DevOps, is looking at DevOps, has employed DevOps in some groups, is working on a full DevOps program, or it's not applicable. If you could just make your selection on that, that would be great. Just share the results. So we've got 41% has employed DevOps in some groups, 31% looking at DevOps, 22% is working on a full DevOps program, 6% is not applicable, and nobody is not interested. So everybody's interested. So there you go. Thank you, Mustafa.
Perfect. And by the way, those numbers that you shared with us is actually very close to what we see in the market as well. So I think we actually have a good cross-sectional of folks.
Oh, interesting. Good to know that. And
yeah.
You're back in outline mode again.
Oh, I am. I wonder why it keeps kicking me out, yeah?
I don't know. Technology.
Try it one more time and see. Huh.
There you go.
There you go. How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And thanks for being patient with us. I'd like to share with you 5 things today, if you don't mind. Very much, I'd like to start with the definition of what is DevOps. And I like to do that simply because if you ask 10 people in the marketplace, you're probably going to get 11 different definitions of DevOps. And as a leader, you have to have a DevOps or a definition that feels right for your organization. So I'd like to share with you the DevOps definition that we use, and you're welcome to use it, you're welcome to tweak it, you're welcome to change it, or customize it to what makes sense for you guys. Second is, let's just talk about what this webinar is all about, is what does it mean to be a DevOps leader, and what are the skills that are required to be a DevOps leader. One of the things that you'll be asked to do very early on as a DevOps leader is to build a vision. And so building a vision or how to get started is going to be one of the toughest things, well, not one of the toughest things, but one of the first thing that you'll be doing. And so I want to share with you some tools and tricks that you can use to do that. I'd like to share with you also what a typical transformation journey looks like so that you as a leader can predict, or you can change your style based on what you know is coming down the pike. And also in this section, we'll kind of talk about what a typical DevOps transformation team should look like. And again, teams changes based on what you're trying to accomplish. What we're talking about here is a full DevOps transformation type of team. And then last but not the least, these are just basically about 7, maybe about 10 rules of the roads as you go through your transformation journey. And hopefully at the end of that, we'll definitely have some time for Q&A. So let's go to the first section. So what is DevOps? Like I said, there's so many different definitions in the marketplace. For us, and for me in IBM, it's really about one thing, and that is about time to market. It is how long does it take for you to bring an idea, which could be a feature, a bug, an enhancement, to the end customer. From the time you say, you know what, I want to develop a feature, to the time in which the customer actually has it in his or her hand and enjoys the feature set. And so DevOps is really about optimizing the flow of work across your SDLC. So we're talking the entire SDLC: planning, development, testing, operations, and monitoring. So you can bring ideas to market faster, and as a result, become more responsive to your customers. And this becomes more and more important, as you guys know, given the amount of investment and the amount of pressure that we're feeling in web and mobile development, as well as in other platforms. Now, it's also good to know what is DevOps compared to where we are now. And usually I find, we usually end up having a very good discussion just on this one slide alone. And so if you think about it, the key differences between traditional service delivery model and DevOps model usually is what I find in these key characteristics. First of all, the key driver in traditional IT is cost. In DevOps, it's all about flow. In traditional IT, organization is usually skill-centric silos. So you'll have your testing team, you'll have a development team, you'll have a database team, you'll have a middleware team, you'll have a virtual machine team and an OS support team. In DevOps, we move away from that and we have autonomous squads. Another feature is the size of features, the batch size. Usually in IT, they're very good at doing big things. So large releases, big projects that are multi-year or multi-months. In DevOps, we're really shrinking it down to smaller and smaller batch sizes of what we call MVPs. In traditional IT, scheduling is complex, simply because you have all these other feature sets that all have to come together. You have to integrate them into one release or one drop. In DevOps, we really are decentralizing it and letting teams kind of do their own releases when it feels right, when it's right for them and for the business. Usually I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have all experienced this, but usually a release is a high-risk event, right? You have war rooms, you sit around and you have coverage for 24 hours, 48 hours. There's always hot fixes and so on and so forth, and they're always a very high-pressure environment. In DevOps, because the releases are so small, or what we call micro-releases, it should be almost a non-event. And the biggest part is the culture piece. In traditional IT, culture is almost like I did my job. Because in a silo, you have a defined responsibility. You don't have visibility to the end-to-end. If you're responsible just for testing, I did testing, and that's it. It doesn't matter what happened before me, or it doesn't matter what happens after me. In DevOps, because the way you organize, the culture changes to I did my job to my team is ready to release the feature. And as for the impact of this, if you look at any of the statistics out there, they say 40% of large projects are usually late. And that is from an IT perspective, that's unfortunately a horrible metric. It's one of the reasons why businesses are always screaming at us as to why we're not responsive. But in DevOps, you deliver at the speed of business. And this is where the small batch sizes, the MVPs, make a big difference, in which you can experiment. You can release something in weeks or maybe a month or two. And so you're always responsive to the business, and by definition, you're always responsive to the end customer who is actually consuming your code. The other impact is, if you look at features, there's a study out there that says 40% of features that we develop and push into production are rarely used. And 40%, if you actually go deeper into the report, it says 40% is, 40% is never used, 20% is rarely used, 20% is sometimes used, and the other 20% is frequently used. And if you put on the hat on of an executive, you say, why am I spending money on 40% of the work that is never used? And so when people start thinking about what is the value of DevOps, this is where it really comes in. And so I only want to deliver what people are using. Usability and measuring usability becomes even more important. So deliver only what is of value. And the last piece is, in IT, the one measurement that we use to calculate our success is cost. It's one of the reasons why we're here. It's one of the reasons why why outsourcing has been so successful. But now the game has changed. And now IT and technology is becoming more and more integrated with the business, as you guys know. And so IT key metric cannot just be cost. It has to be business impact. And business impact can be on the revenue side. It can be in customer acquisition. It can be on lifetime value of the customer. Whatever your business might be and how they measure business KPIs is how you should start thinking about your technology. You know, I was talking to a CIO just last week, and we were trying to figure out where they want to go now. This is a large Fortune 100 company. And, you know, he made a very profound statement, which I thought kind of encapsulates what we're talking about here. And he said, you know, Mustafa, I have IT managers who manage IT who impact IT metrics. What I really want to do is I want to have business managers who manage IT who impact business metrics. And if you hear all of these, if you read on some of these commentary out there about how CIOs need to become business executives or transformational CIOs or leadership, well, that is exactly the big trend that's going on. Is IT is moving away from just being IT to a true business partner. And a lot of the characteristics that you need to be in transformational CIO actually starts here. It starts with becoming a good DevOps leader, because the skills that you learn here will help you grow into your career. Let's see. Okay. So how do you do that? So how do you actually optimize the flow? How do you bring something, how do you reduce the time to market of your SDLC? So there's lots of things out there, and I don't, you know, there's tools out there, there's processes out there, there's technology out there, there's org structures out there. The way we look at it is, you know, there's about 5 building blocks. I'm going to start from the bottom. Technology, of course, is a key component, right? So the first thing is actually flexible infrastructure. And the ability to give a full stack environment to your development that matches production is key. Now, it doesn't matter if this is going to be on-prem, it could be a cloud, it could be hybrid, it doesn't really matter. But this ability to be able to have flexible infrastructure is key, because one of the things you'll find out is that the biggest time delay is infrastructure. The second piece of this is, of course, automation, which is what you're all familiar with. And that is really ability to do push-button code deployment across the pipeline, right? And we're talking about the entire way, from build, test, deploy, rollback, release, monitoring. The more you can automate, the less time, resources that you'll spend on doing these activities. But getting just these two alone is not enough. Because even if you actually do investment in technology, from a time-to-market perspective, automation and flexible infrastructure will only give you maybe 10% of the benefit. The other 90% of the benefit really comes into how we do work. And that's where we get into autonomous teams, in which you have cross-functional, co-located, dedicated, product-focused teams. I know that's a mouthful, but the way we do it right now, like I said in the previous slide, is, we pull people from different silos, we kind of make them into a project team, and then they disband. And one of the things we're always scrambling for is resources. Well, I'm waiting for the tester to show up. The database guy has too much to do, so there's a backlog, so I got to wait for another week for him to give me that table that I want. All of those things are waste or time delay. And so the way to get around that is to actually reorganize into autonomous teams. Another way to look at autonomous teams is just, right now we're vertically siloed. So like I said, we have developers, testers, so on and so forth. All of them are vertically centered by COC. With DevOps, you want to be horizontally. So you want to take a cross-section of those folks, focus them on a product so that they can actually deliver code faster. We talked about small batches in the previous section. And I like to emphasize this again because too many people try to continue to automate, continue to build code with still large project mentality. And unfortunately, the larger the project, the more complex the activities and the more complex the integration. And so you really want to move to smaller batch sizes, break that project down into smaller code so that you can push it out continuously and iterate on it. And then last but not the least is we talked about metrics. And speed really is the new metric. And there's a study out there from Lean that says every time you reduce the speed or cycle time by a quarter, you improve productivity by 20%. And speed, by the way, may sound fuzzy, but speed or time is a very tough taskmaster. If you focus on speed, you will actually impact both cost and profit. So with that being the overview, let me go into what we really hear about is DevOps Leader. And let's just start with a simple question: is what is a leader? Or what is a DevOps leader? Well, first of all, it's not a title, right? It's actually a tactical or a strategic individual who helps design the model that we just talked about, who really helps figure out how can you improve flow across the organization, right? They understand the technical aspects, they understand the cultural aspects, they understand the process aspects. You don't have to be an expert in any of these things, but you actually have to have that 360-degree mindset so that you can have a critical success in your organization, right? They're definitely very good with the human dynamics. A lot of DevOps is actually pushing people out of their comfort zone, and to be able to effectively transact that or to effectively make a change, you have to be very good and sensitive on how much culture change can your organization take and how to go about doing it effectively. And last but not least, and this actually comes, it may come easier to some, it may not come easier to others, but it is a system type of thinking. It is not about how do I optimize my developers to use this tool, or how do I do test automation. It really is end-to-end system thinking. And I think this is actually a key point because, I talked earlier about being a transformational CIO. Well, the CIO does have a very, very broad point of view when he looks at or she looks at the organization. And so when you think about DevOps, you really have to have that broad point of view for that one specific product or application that you're trying to impact. And like I said earlier, it is not a title. You know, everyone is a leader in DevOps, especially anybody who's pushing to make a change in the organization so that they can do better. As for the skill sets, you know, there's two parts to it, right? There's, of course, the technical aptitude. And again, I'm not saying you need to be an expert in all of these. You just have to be well-versed in them. But there's also the emotional piece. And from a technical perspective, you know, it's what we talked about. It's environment management, configuration. It's release and deploy, testing, APIs, microservices. And again, you have to just be knowledgeable about it. You don't have to be somebody who can actually go in and be the ace and who will actually go and code and make create microservices or write scripts and so on and so forth. You have to have a good overview of it. Because giving you that overview will help you do the emotional intelligence better. It'll give you the credibility to go in and talk to people and build a vision. Challenge the team's status quo. It's going to help you be inquisitive as to why are we doing this way? How long does it take for us to do it this way? What can we do differently in order to reduce time? It's also about inspiring pride in being part of the team. It's about caring about individuals because change is hard. People want to know that you have their back. It's about celebrating success and acknowledging improvements. Because even micro improvements, which is what I tell my clients, is that it's very hard to do major improvements, but you can always track micro improvements. And micro improvements can be tracked from a month-to-month basis. It's important because if you don't do that, you could find yourself managing a team that is demoralized. Right? One of the other things that we hear a lot in the marketplace is, well, is DevOps leader really a servant leader? You know, servant leader came up a lot when Agile was first released. But in my opinion, these are two very different roles. In my opinion, a DevOps leader are transformational leaders. They're not servant leaders. Servant leaders are focused on your team's development and performance. It's a key part to it. But a transformation leader challenges the status quo. It actually pushes the team out of their comfort zone. It's about getting people to follow you and to engage with you to make a change. And it's a key distinction. And I hear this a lot in when I talk to my clients. I say, well, we follow a servant leader model. That's great. But when it comes to making dramatic change, you actually need somebody that will actually inspire the change and the confidence. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's been written about DevOps leaders. One of the best resources you can go to is a Puppet report that just came out a few months ago, in which they talk about what is a transformational leader, how they influence the organization, both positive and negative. I just want to put this link out there. You can do a quick Google search to find the report. And if you do get the chance to see it, there is one section in which I would actually recommend that you focus on. And they actually have a section on dimensions of a transformational leader. A lot of the things that we talked about today are in here. It talks about building vision, stimulation, communication, leadership, and recognition. But this is a good place to go and get more information and more deeper differences. Go deep into what it means to be a DevOps transformation, how different companies have actually implemented this. So let's go to the next section, which is building a vision. And so one of the first things that you'll be asked to do as a DevOps leader, and maybe you guys have already done this, is to build a vision. And say, well, what does it mean to do DevOps, and where should we go? What is changing? What do we need to do? And those are hard questions simply because if you're just going to come out and say, well, we're going to do automation first, or we're going to focus on test first, or we're going to focus on infrastructure first, whatever it might be. The question is, unless you don't ground it in a larger conversation, unless you don't say that, well, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. It takes us 10 days to do it now. Using DevOps tools and practices, we're going to reduce it by 5 days or 7 days or whatever that number might be. That is how you get people to buy into the vision. You have to be concrete. You have to be specific. So one of the best tools that I've used in the past to get people from different parts of the IT organization to come together and agree on a vision is to start with a value stream map. And the value stream map, as many of you might already know, is basically a time diagnostic of your software delivery lifecycle. It asks a simple question: what do you do and how long does it take? And then you just add that up, and that becomes your time to market. It's a great way to look at how work flows currently within your organization. End to end, all the way from the time the idea was generated to the time that an end customer gets them in their hands. And by doing that, what it allows you to do, it tells you or helps you identify bottlenecks, waste, which can ultimately then be put together to create your punch list of all the things that you have to do in order to transform. And as leader, being versed in this method, being grounded in actual numbers and metrics, gives you immense credibility and immense staying power to say, no, let's not talk into a religious war about, should we do this or should we do that? Let's go to the value stream. Let's do this data-driven as opposed to emotional-driven. And I kind of talked about this slide already, but it is basically, as a leader, it'll give you the end-to-end flow that we're talking about. Remember, we talked about you need to have a system thinking. Well, this is how you get to system thinking. It talks about the metrics. So you can always go back and say you have credibility. It is where you start employing lean technologies of how you identify waste. And one of the things that actually really works well is the best way to do a value stream mapping is not by yourself. So you get a group of people from across the board. So you're talking developers, testers, operators, database, security, all of them to a room. And when you do it together as a team, what it does is create a common language. Everybody's looking at a problem together. Everybody sees the end-to-end problems together. And then together, you can actually figure out what the future state looks like. And by doing that, as a leader, if you can do this, you are by definition building a vision, you're getting a team together on the same page, and you're creating a plan that the team has already bought into. So let me give you an example. This is actually from a client, right? So you guys have seen this, right? So there's a small project, they go to production. The simple question I ask CIO is, how long does it take you to do this? And he said, it takes me 90 days. That's good. And I said, well, how long does it take for you to just do development? Well, 20 days, which means you spend 70 days taking something that has been developed into production. And so the question is, what do you do in that 70 days, or why does it take you 70 days? He can always say, well, I want to improve Agile. So that's great, you can. But, if you improve Agile, maybe you take 20 days and make it 18 days. Maybe you can do it 15 days. But the real bogey is the 70 days. And that's what a value stream map tells you. It focuses you on where you should actually put your energy. So for this organization, it was, let's figure out what you do in the 70 days. And so when they actually did a value stream mapping with us, they found out all of these bottlenecks. They found out that they always had to wait for build engineers. It was another team, so they had to send a ticket. They had to wait for 2 or 5 days. Very hard to get the testing team to be on the same page. Integration testing was always a pain. And then even with the release, because it was a different team, they had to wait in queue for somebody to release it. And so they added all those up and said, you know what, if we just impact some of these things, we can actually improve our time to market. And so this, and by the way, this is just the stuff that came out on the surface. There's just so much more. And they identified about 3 or 4 opportunities out of the value stream. I think they talked about we're going to improve our time to market for getting an environment to a developer. We're going to automate some of our release, and we're going to change some of our organization and collapse some of the silos. And what they came up with at the end of this exercise, saying that our goal is to reduce that 70 days by a quarter. Right? So nothing aspirational. Let's say eventually I want to get rid of that 70 days and make that into 3 or 4 days. But for now, I'm just going to reduce that 70 days by a quarter. And so what took them 90 days, now total takes them probably about 65 days. And if you look at it from an executive perspective, that's great, because the same amount of team, but they're more productive. And so doing 4 releases a year, well, at 60 or 65 days, you can now do 5 releases a year. And so you just improved your productivity by 20%. And as a leader, those are the kind of things that will make you stand out and give you the staying power to do the transformation. And by the way, most people think value stream mapping is a one-time event. You do it in the beginning, you kind of create your future state, and you're done. In fact, what you'll find is your value stream map is going to be one of your best friends, in which you can keep going back to it and keep finding new and new opportunities. It's one of those continuous improvement tools that that you can go back to and say, well, let's take a look at this value stream again, and let's figure out where the new opportunities are. In fact, value stream mapping is usually where we start with most of our customers to help them figure out what to do with DevOps transformation. So let's talk about what a typical journey looks like. Right? Because as a leader, you should have some insight as to what the future state is going to be. I should say what the journey is going to be and where your team structure should be, so that you can actually make change effectively. And so if you look at it from an application perspective, one of the key things that we've learned through our transformation journey is that to make a change, you got to do it one application at a time or one group of applications at a time. Doing an enterprise-wide change is too risky, and most enterprises can't digest it. So if you do it an application at a time, it kind of goes through 3 phases. The first phase is you have to engage the team. Right? This is where the leader is extremely critical. Right? You have to first create a group of change agents or a transformation team within the application. You got to build a customized transformation plan. And the behavior you're really trying to do is you're trying to move people away from resistance to just being open to change. And in the next phase, we'll kind of go through more detailed activities. Right? The next phase is once you actually have them on board, you start to invest and experiment with purpose. Here you're starting to build some capabilities, like capabilities could be in environments, could be in automation, could be in user-centric design, which is great for building MVPs. And you start piloting and experimenting, and you learn from it. And again, you want to keep the blast radius small, so you want to make sure that you're not impacting too many things, so you have to be selective in where you choose. Again, things things you want to do to stack the deck in your favor to make sure that you as a leader are successful. And then once you get to phase 3, you refine and scale. And you kind of go back to phase 1, you go back to phase 2, and it becomes a continuous model. You want to get to the point in which it just becomes the way your team does work. And many of the teams that we have found who have gone through this journey, you will come to a point in which continuous improvement becomes just the way the team works. They've done one, they've improved one area, they get good feedback, so now they want to improve 2 areas, they get better feedback, and that feedback, acknowledgement that we talked about previously as a leader, that's what drives them to keep looking for new opportunities, investing in new opportunities, and experimenting. And you want to get to that point in time in which it becomes a self-sustaining transformation. So if you actually look at more details, engaging the team is of course, create a transformation team. Figure out who in that application group you're most likely to be your change agents. Develop that value stream mapping. I cannot emphasize that hard more enough. Define what best looks like with your team. Develop the future state with the team. And then decide what are the 1 or 2 things that you are going to focus on. And that becomes your transformation plan. And it's not just enough to come up with a plan, but it's also enough to come up with the metrics or the micrometrics that we talked about. So we're going to do A, B, and C, which takes 7 days, and we're going to do it in 5. That is part of the engage phase. Then you get to invest in experiments, and that's when you start mobilizing technology capabilities teams. Some organizations have this as a separate organization. Some actually do it with themselves. But the technology capability team is simply a team that's going to invest in, say, learning automation and bringing automation to that team, or bringing UCD skills, user-centered design skills to the team, whatever it might be. There's a little bit of training that's involved. You have to pilot the new model. Definitely prepare for failure. And DevOps is about 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Prepare yourself and the team for failure. I know this sounds trivial, but if they know that they're going to fail, they will be better able to deal with that failure. Because then that failure becomes a learning opportunity. And then definitely track your metrics. It doesn't matter if you actually have made only a small dent in, say, the metrics that you had. You may not have been able to achieve everything that you wanted, but the trend is important. Showing a positive trend is key because that is part of that feedback loop that we talked about. And then the phase 3 is, of course, codify new ways of working. You go back to your value stream, look for new opportunities, go through the same process, identify new areas of improvement, repeat your phase 2. But then you also want to share your experience. Not just with the rest of your team, but maybe the rest of the organization to start getting some of the goodwill and buzz going. And it's a great way for you to help the hardest working members of your team to get a little bit of acknowledgement from their peers. It's amazing how much miles you can get from that simple activity. Of course, I can't stress enough the metrics piece. As for the kind of team that you want to put together in order to do this transformation, is you have to really think about 2 areas. Right? It kind of goes back to our original thing about, a DevOps leader has to have technical capabilities and emotional intelligence. Well, your team actually reflects those 2 skill sets. Your capabilities team or new technology capabilities team, and this is really about building technology capabilities. Right? Design and build capabilities, find the right tool, assist the application team during transformation, the experts on that tool or that capability. And by the way, I keep saying tool, but it's beyond tool. It has to do with automation, with organization design, if you're going to go to a squad model, if you're going to invest in agile, whatever that might be. And then, of course, the emotional side of this is you have to have an adoption team. And by the way, the size and number of these teams will change based on the size of the adoption or the transformation. if you're responsible for just one or two applications, then your team is going to be very small. It just might be one or two people. If you are in that 20% that we talked about in the poll, in which you're trying to do an enterprise-wide transformation and you're doing a few applications at a time, the size of the team is much bigger. With that, let me go to the last section, and then we'll kind of go to Q&A. I think we have about 15 minutes left. So I want to make sure we have some time for that. So rules of the road, right? These are kind of things that we've learned. Well, I've learned as I've helped companies go through the transformation. And I've been lucky enough. In fact, I've been doing DevOps for the last 3 or 4 years. I've had the benefit of helping about 50 plus teams or 50 plus organizations go through some type of a DevOps transformation. And so these are kind of things that I kind of keep in my back pocket. So it's always about pick the right application. It's very important that you pick something that you know that you can impact. You don't want to go and do DevOps on mainframe as your first pilot. You want to do it on applications that you know you can change. Maybe it's a small team. Maybe it's just a mobile team. Maybe it's just a web team. Pick the right application. Doing that is half the battle. Do the value stream. Use it to prioritize bottlenecks using data, not gut. Build a business case. I think this is key if you actually want to get some executives to buy in. And don't try to do everything at one time. Even within the application, pick one or two bottlenecks at a time. Focus on it. Track the micrometrics, which will give you then permission to impact other bottlenecks. And what you want to do is restructure the work for better flow. Flow is your best friend. Anytime you look at a problem, you got to start asking a question. Remember, system thinking, 360 degrees thinking is how does this impact end-to-end? A few other things to think about is organize your team around value. And remember, in software delivery, value is development and then speed of delivery. So you want to make sure that you organize around value, which is where these autonomous teams come in, where these squads come in. And there's lots of models out there. Spotify is one of them. It's not the only one. There's a pretty good one. Make sure information is created and consumed in real time. This is where the monitoring piece comes in. I know we didn't talk too much about monitoring. And then this is also where testing comes in. You want to get quick feedback as to what's going on. You don't want to wait for days and weeks and find out that you've had a defect or that something's wrong. And by the way, this philosophy of getting quick feedback is also very much at the heart of this MVP or small batches concept. You put something out in the marketplace, you get quick feedback from the marketplace saying that, yes, you got this right, no, you didn't get it right, or you got somewhere in the middle and you got to tweak it. That's how you get to building at the speed of business, or how you avoid getting that 40% bloat that we kind of talked about earlier. Creating a change management plan, I think we kind of talked about that while you do the value stream mapping. Time is a metric. Again, I keep saying, too many times I go to DevOps transformation team and I ask them, well, how are you measuring success? Time, unfortunately, never shows up. So while we're doing all these great things, that's great. But how is this impacting the key metric of time? And of course, there's lots and lots of tools, right? The tools are an enabler. They're not the ones that is going to get you to save time, but the tools are there to help you change or become the catalyst for change. And with that, I think we're at the end. Let's go to Q&A.
Thank you, Mustafa. Lots of good information you're sharing with us here. Thank you so much for that.